My dad demanded I attend a fashion show hosted by my cousin who used to mock my looks. "Just try not to embarrass me," he whispered. I was the closing designer and got a standing ovation. It was a typical Friday evening in our house. The kind of night when the air felt a little too still, and you could hear the buzz of the refrigerator from the next room. I was sitting in my bedroom in Norfolk, Virginia, scrolling through design blogs, when my phone rang. The number on the screen was familiar, my dad's. I hesitated, but answered anyway. "Hey," I said, already feeling a bit of dread in my chest. "Are you coming to the fashion show next week?" he asked, not even bothering with a greeting. I paused. "What fashion show?" "Don't play dumb, I'm talking about the one Cassandra is hosting." "The one in Richmond?" Cassandra, my cousin, the one who had always been the star of the family, always the perfect, beautiful, fashionable one. I was the opposite of her. She had always made sure to remind me of that, in subtle ways, commenting on how bad my clothes were, how my hair was too messy, how my makeup looked like a disaster. I never let it get to me, but it did. I couldn't remember a time when I didn't feel like I was failing in her eyes. "I wasn't planning on it," I said, trying to avoid the conversation. He sighed. "Well, you're going." "I'm not asking, I'm telling." "Get your act together." I frowned, my heart sinking a little. "Why do I have to go? It's not like I fit in with that crowd. And you know how Cassandra treats me." "I don't care about that. It's family, and you'll be there," he said, dismissing my feelings without a second thought. "Just try not to embarrass me, alright?" I didn't know how to respond to that. So, I didn't. "Fine," I muttered. "I'll go." The next few days felt like they were dragging by. I didn't have a plan to attend the show with any kind of excitement or anticipation. I just went through the motions, pretending to care while in the back of my mind, I was dreading it. The thought of seeing Cassandra, perfect, flawless Cassandra, with her perfect life and perfect looks, was a bit too much for me to stomach. I spent most of the week convincing myself that I was doing this for my dad. He had always been distant, and I guess he saw me as a reflection of himself. I don't think he understood how much I had been struggling with my confidence. And seeing me walk into a room where Cassandra shined? That wasn't something I was looking forward to. On the morning of the show, I woke up early and tried to put together an outfit. I wasn't in the mood to dress up, it felt pointless. But I also didn't want to look completely out of place. I settled on a simple black dress and a pair of black boots. It wasn't much, but it was all I could muster. I heard my dad's voice downstairs. "You ready yet?" "Almost," I called back, already feeling the nerves creep in. When I made my way downstairs, my dad barely glanced at me. He was dressed in his usual crisp suit, and his eyes flickered over me for a second, then returned to his phone. "Let's get going. Don't make us late." I didn't bother to argue. There was no point. The fashion show was held in Richmond at a lavish venue. The moment we walked through the door, I could feel the weight of the world on my shoulders. The place was full of strangers, each one more fashionable and confident than the next. I stood at the entrance, gripping my purse, and trying to act like I belonged there. My dad was already making small talk with some business contacts. He barely noticed me. I spotted Cassandra almost immediately. She was standing near the front of the room, talking to a group of people, her perfect posture and smile in place. Her appearance was immaculate, her hair, makeup, her outfit, it was all so effortless, like she'd been born to be on this stage. I felt a pang of envy, followed quickly by resentment. She looked up and saw me standing by the door. The smile on her face didn't reach her eyes. "So, you decided to show up," she said, her voice dripping with that familiar condescension. I didn't know how to respond. I just nodded, forcing a tight smile. "I guess Dad dragged you here," she continued, eyeing me up and down, her gaze lingering on the dress I had picked. "Well, good luck." I couldn't even muster a response to that. My dad was right behind me then, his presence like a cold shadow. "Stay out of trouble," he muttered, before moving off to greet someone else. Cassandra smirked and then turned away, leaving me standing there feeling smaller than I ever had. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was how the entire event felt like a parade of people who barely acknowledged my existence. Even when I tried to engage with a few familiar faces, they'd glance at me for a second and then quickly move on. My dad seemed oblivious to the fact that I was uncomfortable. He was too caught up in his conversations to notice how isolated I felt. I spent the rest of the evening trying to blend into the background, hoping that no one would notice me too much. But it didn't help that everyone seemed so glamorous while I was stuck in my own head, doubting my worth. Eventually, the show started, and the models began walking the runway in Cassandra's designs. They were beautiful, sure. I had to admit that. But as each model passed by, I could feel the weight of my own self-doubt growing heavier. It felt like everything was being put under a magnifying glass: Cassandra's success, her beauty, her career. And then there was me. The one who didn't fit in, the one who never had the right look, the right clothes, the right attitude. But then, at the very last minute, the announcer mentioned that they would have a surprise closing designer. I had no idea what was going on. I wasn't prepared for this. But then the lights dimmed, and I was called to the stage. A flood of nerves hit me. I froze for a second before I realized I had no choice but to walk out there. This was it. This was my moment. And the truth was, I had no idea how I got here. The last few months had been a blur of sleepless nights spent working on designs for a competition I hadn't even told my family about. I didn't want to. They wouldn't have taken me seriously anyway. But I had won. And that meant I was here now. As I stepped onto the stage, I saw the models in my designs. My pieces. The ones I had worked on in secret. My heart raced as the crowd's energy shifted. They were paying attention. I watched as the audience's expressions changed from mild curiosity to approval. A few people were already clapping. The applause grew louder with each new piece that came down the runway. This was happening. It was surreal, but it was real. The last model came down the runway, and I was next. The spotlight hit me, and I walked out, trying to stay calm. As I made my way to the center of the stage, the applause exploded. It was overwhelming. And for the first time, I didn't feel like I was invisible. I felt seen, validated. I was good enough. The show ended, and I was met with a standing ovation. It was surreal. My heart was pounding in my chest, and I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. But all I could do was stand there, taking it in. I glanced at my dad. He was staring at me, his jaw slightly dropped. "Well, I'll be damned," he muttered, shaking his head. "You did it." But then, I noticed Cassandra. She was standing near the side of the stage, and her smile was nowhere to be found. I couldn't quite place the expression on her face. It was a mix of disbelief and something else I couldn't quite identify. It was almost like she didn't know how to respond to this new version of me. As the night went on, I found myself in a strange position. My dad didn't say much else, but his expression had shifted. He didn't have to say it, I could tell that he was impressed. Maybe even proud. Cassandra, on the other hand, gave me a tight-lipped smile, but there was no warmth behind it. I was fine with that. The old me would have cared, but not anymore. I wasn't the same girl who had once allowed her words to cut me so deeply. I had proven something to myself that night. And for once, I felt like I belonged, not in the world they had created, but in the world I was building for myself. The after-party was where everything started to feel a little more real. People gathered in clusters, sipping champagne and chatting animatedly about the show. There was a buzz in the air, and the energy felt like something I hadn't experienced before. I wandered around the room, trying to keep myself composed, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was finally breaking free of something I hadn't even realized I was trapped in. For the first time in a long while, I felt like I wasn't invisible. I spotted my dad again, talking to some well-dressed man who was clearly impressed by the designs that had graced the runway. My dad was nodding, giving his usual stiff smile. I couldn't tell if he was proud of me, or if he was just basking in the attention that my success had brought to him. Still, I couldn't help but notice the look of surprise in his eyes when he had seen me on stage. For years, I had worked to please him, to prove that I could be something. But even when I succeeded in other areas of my life, there was always this distance between us. Like I wasn't good enough, no matter what I did. Tonight was different. It wasn't just about the applause or the recognition, it was about breaking free of the self-doubt that had plagued me for so long. I made my way toward the bar, needing a moment to breathe. The cool air from the open windows brushed against my skin, and I let it calm my nerves as I stood there, quietly watching the scene unfold around me. Then, out of nowhere, Cassandra appeared at my side. I could feel her presence before I even turned to look at her. Her voice, smooth as silk but edged with something I couldn't quite place, broke the silence. "You did well," she said, her tone clipped. I turned to face her, surprised by her words. It wasn't the usual snide remark. There was something different about her now, like she was trying to be respectful, or at least not openly dismissive. "Thanks," I replied, my voice steady. "It means a lot." She tilted her head slightly, sizing me up. "I didn't expect you to pull it off," she said, almost like she was speaking to herself more than to me. "You've always been different. But you've got something." It was almost a compliment, but there was a hesitation in her voice that made me unsure whether it was genuine or not. Still, I didn't feel the need to fight for her approval. I didn't even feel the need to explain myself to her anymore. I had done what I came to do. I had proven something that was so much more important than winning over Cassandra. "Good to hear," I said, offering her a small smile. There was a beat of silence between us before she nodded, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. Then, she walked away without another word. I couldn't help but wonder what was going through her mind. Did she feel threatened? Was she just embarrassed by how much attention I was getting? The Cassandra I used to know would have never given me a second glance. But tonight was different. Maybe I wasn't the only one who had changed. I tried to shake off the lingering thoughts and focus on the fact that I had just pulled off something incredible. My collection had been showcased alongside some of the most talented designers in the city, and it had been received well by the audience. The standing ovation was still echoing in my mind. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of well-wishers and polite conversations. Some of the guests were designers themselves, others were people in the fashion industry who had come to see the latest trends. I exchanged business cards, listened to people compliment my work, and tried not to let the weight of it all overwhelm me. But every time I caught a glimpse of my dad, standing off to the side with his colleagues, I couldn't shake the feeling that he was somehow proud. It was a strange sensation, like a part of me was still waiting for his approval, but another part of me was finally letting go of that need. As the night wore on and the crowd began to thin out, I found myself alone at a table, nursing a glass of water, trying to process everything that had just happened. I wasn't sure what I had expected from this night, but it was more than I could have hoped for. There was a part of me that thought maybe it would end with Cassandra and me having some sort of reconciliation, where we finally became equals in the family. But as the night stretched on, it became clear to me that reconciliation wasn't really what I was looking for. What I wanted, more than anything, was to stop needing anyone's approval. Not just from my dad or Cassandra, but from everyone. I had always believed that if I just worked harder, tried harder, I could make people see me for who I truly was. But now I understood that it wasn't about proving myself to anyone else, it was about accepting who I was, flaws and all, and owning my place in the world. I stood up, the weight of the evening beginning to settle in my bones. The crowd was beginning to dwindle, and the lights in the venue were dimming. I walked outside, needing some fresh air. The cool night air hit my face, and I took a deep breath, closing my eyes for a moment. "You did well." I turned around to see my dad standing in the doorway behind me. His hands were shoved in his pockets, and his expression was neutral, but there was something in his eyes that I hadn't seen before. It was almost as if he was unsure. Like he didn't quite know what to say but still wanted to acknowledge me. Thanks, I said, feeling a small lump form in my throat. You've got a future in this, he added, still not quite meeting my eyes. I didn't expect that from you. I didn't know what to say to that. The words didn't seem to fit the moment. There had been so many years of feeling small in his eyes, of wondering if he'd ever be proud of me. But now, standing here on the edge of this moment, I realized that his approval wasn't what I needed anymore. I wasn't sure if he would ever fully understand the magnitude of what had happened that night. Maybe he never would. But I understood it. And that was enough for me. I think so, I said quietly. I think I'm finally starting to figure it out. He nodded, though he didn't say anything else. We stood there in silence for a while, just watching the dimming lights of the city and the fading sounds of the party behind us. It felt like the end of something, but I couldn't quite put my finger on what it was. It was as if, in that moment, I had let go of so many expectations. And for the first time in my life, I felt like I could stand on my own. The night stretched on, but I could feel it winding down. The buzz of conversation around us began to thin, and the energy in the venue felt more like an aftertaste, faint but still lingering. My dad had stepped back, retreating to his small circle of business acquaintances. Cassandra, though, was nowhere to be seen. And for once, that didn't bother me. It used to be that her absence would have left me feeling small, invisible. Now? I was just grateful for the space. I stepped out into the cool night air, letting the silence settle around me. The night had been a whirlwind of new beginnings and reluctant acknowledgments, but the one thing I still couldn't shake was the thought of Cassandra. There was something unfinished about that encounter between us, the lingering tension, the way her eyes had flickered with something I couldn't quite name. I had thought that I'd be content to leave it all behind, but I wasn't. Not yet. I could hear my dad's voice inside, still deep in conversation with the important people, all nodding in approval of everything that had just happened. He was enjoying the moment, basking in the afterglow of my success, but somehow it felt like I had been a tool in his plans all along. I didn't blame him entirely for that. It wasn't his fault I had spent so many years trying to live up to his expectations. But the more I thought about it, the more it became clear to me, I wasn't just proving something to him anymore. I was proving something to myself. It was then that I saw her, Cassandra. She was walking toward me, her steps measured and deliberate, her face set in a mask of calm. The tension in my chest tightened again, but I didn't flinch. I didn't move. This time, I wouldn't let her words or her presence shake me. She stopped just a few feet away, a slight smirk on her lips. Well, she started, her voice smooth but not as biting as usual. I guess I have to admit it. I raised an eyebrow, keeping my expression neutral. Admit what? Her eyes flickered away briefly, then met mine again. You've made it. I didn't think you had it in you. She paused, clearly trying to measure how much of herself to reveal. And I guess you've earned some respect. The words weren't what I had expected. They were close, but there was still a trace of that condescension, just buried beneath a thin layer of something more like grudging admiration. It wasn't enough, but it was a start. I didn't respond right away, instead letting her words hang in the air for a moment. It was clear she was waiting for a reaction from me, a thank you or some sign of weakness that would let her maintain control. But I wasn't that person anymore. No, I finally said, my voice steady. You don't have to admit anything, Cassandra. You're not the one I needed validation from. Her eyes narrowed, and the smirk on her face faltered for a split second, just long enough for me to see a flicker of irritation. That feeling, the power of watching her squirm, was a strange one, but it wasn't satisfying in the way I thought it might be. Instead, it made me realize just how much I had grown. I didn't need her approval. I didn't need anything from her anymore. I stepped closer, my heart still racing, but now for a different reason. You've spent my whole life making me feel like I didn't matter. Like I wasn't good enough. I thought I needed your approval to prove that I was something. But now, I know that I don't need anyone's approval but my own. Her face shifted, the mask slipping a little as her eyes widened in surprise. For a second, I thought I saw something resembling genuine regret, or maybe just disbelief, flicker across her features. I didn't give her time to recover. And you know what, Cassandra? I'm not the awkward girl who hides behind designs anymore. I'm the designer who stands on her own 2 feet. And I'm going to make it without needing you or anyone else to tear me down to get there. There was silence between us. She didn't speak. She didn't try to argue. Instead, she took a step back, her posture stiff, as if she were unsure whether to respond or retreat. But the moment she did take a step back, I knew this wasn't my victory over her. It was my victory over everything I had allowed myself to believe about my worth. I turned away from her then, not giving her a chance to say anything more. For the first time in years, I didn't feel the weight of her presence on my back, pushing me down. I didn't care what she thought. I didn't care what anyone thought. I was done seeking validation from a family that never quite saw me for who I was, and I was done playing the part they expected. I had worked too hard for too long to let anyone define me again, not even Cassandra, not even my dad. The next few months passed in a whirlwind of opportunities one had never expected. My collection had caught the eye of several industry professionals, and I began receiving offers from boutiques and even larger fashion houses interested in carrying my line. My social media following grew exponentially, and for the first time, I realized that I had built something real, something worth standing behind. My dad, predictably, didn't fully understand it. He still saw me as a quiet, artsy girl with a tendency to disappear into the background. But there was no denying the change in the air when he spoke about me to his colleagues. I had become a success story, his daughter, the designer who had come from nowhere. And Cassandra? Well, things hadn't been the same between us. I still saw her at family gatherings, but the dynamic had shifted. She didn't mock me anymore. She didn't even look down on me. If anything, I could sense a strange, silent tension between us. She had lost the power she once held over me, and she didn't know how to respond to that. I noticed that she began to tone down her usual bravado, and the compliments she offered were few and far between, like she was trying to be nice, but didn't quite know how to go about it. I had heard through the grapevine that she had reached out to some of the same boutiques and companies that had approached me. But they weren't as eager to work with her anymore, and the deals she'd been counting on fell through. I didn't feel sorry for her, not anymore. It wasn't that I wanted her to fail. It was just that I realized that the only way to truly move forward was by letting go of the past, by letting go of her, of the person I thought I needed to be, and of the idea that anyone else's success had to diminish mine. I had finally taken control of my own life, and in doing so, I realized that the best revenge wasn't about dragging someone down. It was about rising above them, quietly, unapologetically.